felt this heat in my spine start to increase and rise. And I felt and saw this multi-spectral white light within me grow so brightly that it filled all of my senses. My body was vibrating on a molecular level, but I did feel that I was losing my grasp on my body. There was a different conscious entity sending me some message from somewhere else. The government and the military industrial complex companies are just starting to discover the connection between what they're calling the phenomena and consciousness, and how instrumental and fundamental consciousness is to the whole thing. Non-human intelligence and extraterrestrial stuff is absolutely plugged into consciousness, because, again, if consciousness is the fundamental substrata of all of physics, it's going to make sense that absolutely everything within the emergent property of space-time is going to be connected with consciousness.
We had so many fantastic riffs at Psy Games, both on and off the record. Some we did get on the record. And I could say from the jump, like I was just saying before we were recording, I think this one is just going to be so fabulous, because I think we harmonize on our interests in all this stuff so much. You've got direct ties to the philosophy of consciousness world with people like Federico Fagin. You've got a direct awakening experience. You're super interested in the phenomena, whatever you want to call that, NHI, UAP world. So excited to riff with you, man. You're like the perfect guest, I think, for the show.
Yeah, I've had so many people tell me, man, you need to get on and talk with Michael Phillip. And I was like, okay, who's that?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd seen some clips of your podcast, and I was like, oh, I love that. And so when we got together at the Psy Games, that was an amazing moment of synchronicity that I guess the universe decided needed to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was seamless. Kindred spirits for sure. And I mean, I think it makes sense. I know you've probably told the awakening experience story so much that it's just kind of like a script that goes off in your mind at this point. But it seems like such a pivotal moment for you, and such a powerful moment where your idea of reality really, broke open, and your ideas about consciousness, other consciousnesses potentially interfacing with our personal consciousness, all of these things suddenly became such a palpable reality for you. So I feel like we got to start there.
Yeah, most definitely. And it was certainly a transformational jumping off point for me. And it's one of those things where you'd think I'd talk about it all the time, but I mean, even before we have this conversation, one of the things that I want to point out is there's a caveat.
Hmm.
Like, you and I both know that when you discuss internal experiences, those kind of things are ineffable, right? They're beyond words. That if you even select one word, you're racing away from the truth at light speed. Like, if there are some people in the audience who had never experienced what it feels like to sit in a hot tub, and
Right.
they don't understand the feeling of water, warm, wet, bubbles as they traverse from the bottom to the top across your skin, etc., and hit your hair. There's just an infinitude of analogies that we could put together that would not deliver truth, right? Would not deliver the experience that you would have if you were sitting in a hot tub. So when listening to anything out of this pie hole, take it with a shaker of salt, because at the point that we're trying to discuss an experience, we're starting to choose words that just are going to pale in comparison to the experience itself. There's going to be meaning that you assign to those words that's going to take you off the path of truth. The idea is to take all these words to try to get you in a direction from maybe if you're farther away from an internal experience, you use the words to push those in push you in a general direction towards that internal experience. But please replace all the words and all the books you
Mhm.
ever read with the
Mhm.
internal experience that you have, because that's the
Yeah.
delivery of truth, right? Personally, I think that we've had 7,000 years of contemplative disciplines, without mass communication technologies, at least electronic mass communication technologies. We've had this consciousness thing within us that we haven't been using, which is a great mass communication technology. But at the point that we were at a way of being able to communicate one to many, it almost becomes a responsibility that we have to take this experiment and move forward and say, okay, so these are the types of things that you can experience internally. And these are the disciplines that you can use globally, to be able to have these internal experiences, and then use those internal experiences as you're teaching, because you're
Yeah.
plugged into the real thing. Like, everyone listening to this is absolutely plugged into consciousness. You absolutely have a way of going within yourself to find the truth. And so use any story that comes out of this as an example of what you can find. Don't glom on to anything, any one thing, or any many things that I say, because the truth is going to be discerned from your internal experience. It's not going to be discerned from anything that you and I say here,
Right.
on this, podcast or conversation or whatever. And I know that we both had, some internal experiences that have changed us, and those are important for us, and they lead us in the right direction. In using those as a tool, simply use them as a tool. If you're listening, like, don't replace this with, or remove the need for you to do
Yeah.
your own internal introspection, and that type of thing. So I
Yeah.
don't want to beat a dead horse on that, but
For sure. That, this is reminding me of is, have you read any Robert Anton Wilson?
no, I haven't.
Oh man,
I'm exceptionally unwell read, by the way, and uneducated. Like, I love this idea of you and me, batting things back and forth, because you are so educated and you are
oh,
so
thanks.
well read. It's like,
Not, yeah, thanks, man. I don't feel like it. I truly feel like I'm just like a neophyte in all of this stuff, and I've just stumbled across so many ideas and books over a long period of time. But he's just a very mercurial, trickstery, but also sincere explorer of, exotic states of consciousness. And he's like a multidisciplinary guy, but everything is written with like he will purposely just throw in fake organizations, fake names, fake things for fun in his books. But he refer, he always uses the abbreviation BS when he's talking about belief systems, and
oh,
calling them
great.
other people's BS. And that's what that whole riff you just um went on reminded me of, is like, yeah, all like these things happen to me, these things happen to you, but don't like construct a BS around someone else's experience. If anything, yeah, of course, I would be a hypocrite if I said not to be inspired by other people's experiences, not to investigate those avenues, but don't take it as like gospel without experiencing it yourself, for sure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because the reality is that's the only time we really learn. It's the only time our subconscious will allow us to learn. Like, and for reference, anybody who doesn't know me, I ran into this big awakening like 25 years ago, and then I tried to apply the science and
Hmm.
understanding, and started doing all the research and the reading into neuroscience and all this stuff. So I
Yeah.
try to make these connections. But yeah, I mean, that's the only time that we really learn, is when we're spelunking through the subconscious. Is not, that we get the idea of the concept of 2 + 2 = 4. We actually experience, the picture of the 1, 2 apples, and then the picture of the 1, 2 apples and the plus sign, and then we count 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're told that's the right answer, and gives us a little dopamine hit, etc. But it's the internal experience
Hmm.
of 1, 2, 3, 4 gets us the concept of addition and subtraction, multiplication, that type of thing, when we're actually looking at the visuals that are put out for us to learn those concepts. It's never that we can put it together without the internal experience of seeing those things occur before our eyes. And so, just like with any other experience, like the hot tub, I can't explain it to you, but you get into it and you experience it. I dump you into
Hmm.
the hot tub, boom, instant epiphany. There's no more questions, there's no more analogies, there's no more discussion that you need to understand the reality of what it's like to sit in a hot tub. And consciousness expansion and internal experience are the same exact way. They exist, they're built within our physiology. There's still a lot of science out there that's trying to discover how these things come through, but there's Six Sigma science that shows that our consciousness goes beyond our physical existence, and it's proved that we dip into the non-local. And so then how that happens is still a question and hasn't been answered yet, but it's always the experience within that brings us that
Yeah.
internal knowing, that internal learning. I mean, even Einstein said, when you're dealing with a scientific problem, it's never you that comes up with the answer. It's like, you think about it, you internalize it, and you embody it a little bit, and then you let it go, and you don't
Right.
think about it for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden the answer comes through you, right?
Yeah.
Comes through your physiology, and then you take credit for it as being the smart one at the top, when we're actually the dumb one at the top. And the answer is coming from below us in our subconscious awareness that's chewed
Yeah.
on that problem for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And for people that don't know, Einstein he famously talked about what you're talking about, like essentially doing these almost dreamlike meditative thought experiments on the problems that he was working on. And he wouldn't just access information empirically through like number crunching and data acquisition. He would almost go into these like deep altered states of meditative consciousness. And that's what would produce the epiphany. I think he called like
Yeah.
they're like Gedanken experiments or something like that, if I'm
That's
not
exactly what he
mistaken.
called it.
Yeah.
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 That was exactly the word that he used. It was his internal mind experiments, right?
Yeah.
And those
Very
would
fascinating.
often reveal to him the visions that he was able, like he put, relativity together by, jumping on a train and turning, going the speed of light and turning on the light and see what
Yeah.
happens. Like his
Hmm.
brain
Hmm.
literally said, okay, well, I'm going to show you what happens when that happens. And then he was able to put that into some mathematical expressions and hand it off to some smarter mathematicians. And then, later write to a little girl. He's like, yeah, I don't even understand my own theory now that the math guys have gotten a hold
Wow. That's wild. That's
of
wild.
it.
Yeah, and then I mean, let's not even go down this branch, but I just have to like acknowledge it. There's a big fat throbbing question then about where this wisdom even comes from, right? If
Yeah.
it's not simply empirically going out there number crunching, finding a new equation like Einstein did, the question of well, where is that even coming from? Where is that higher knowing even coming from? To me it immediately implies a sort of like platonic anamnesis or like remembering or somehow confronting the fact that you already somehow something in you knew it or was attached to something that knew it, and that just is an anathema to the way that mainstream reductive ground up science thinks about reality. But anyway, this also is kind of a good pivot point into speaking of like direct knowing, directly being in touch with something. It's kind of a good pivot point into your awakening story, I think.
Oh, right. So, yeah, it was, and it's one of those things that, hits you out of the blue and is beyond explanation, but it delivers a set of internal experiences that allow you to gather lessons that are useful for yourself. And then that if you go deep enough, that are useful for humanity and society. Like one of the things that you just mentioned was, uh, Einstein dipping into consciousness to get a lot of his answers. The same thing happened to me just recently, where I got the algorithms of human emotion, was able to test them through AI. Got that from a not, I'm not smart enough to put that stuff together. And but we tested it and it turned out to be accurate. It's like, okay, so where does that intelligence reside, right? Because if you dip into an internal experience and then you're able to pull through some useful, knowledgeable stuff, how does that happen? Where is the intelligence that you're tapping into?
Hmm.
um, and what's the larger structure of the data of that intelligence? Where's that held? Because it's not held within space time, obviously, because you could just walk over and pick it up and then answer all your questions. That's not how we're accessing this information. And I think there is a phenomenon that is both physiological and spiritual that I think keeps us separate from that space of infinite intelligence,
Hmm.
because our limited physiologies can't handle accessing it all the time. Like imagine you had to process all of infinity before you were able to lift a sandwich to your mouth
Right.
to
Yeah.
have lunch to sustain, your physiological survival. You wouldn't be able to, it would be a spinning beach ball forever. You'd never get
Right.
there and
Yeah.
you'd
Right.
die of starvation. um I think there is a limitation of being able to access that all the time, but I think there's a veil that once you pierce it, you can reach through into that space of non-local intelligence and get the things out of there that are useful for you to answer the problems and whatnot. And I think it all comes down to that first experience that shows you you're more than your body. And mine was an amazing transformational experience that has still seen no parallel in my life since. And it came after like this immediate string of successes, believe it or not, but that revealed that even though all of the things that I had aligned were good from a, like a American dreams perspective, I started with, I had a great career that was bringing me a bunch of money. I had a bunch of friends. I had great romantic interests. I had a good relationship with what I perceived to be God. I had a decent history inside of the Christian religion that had brought me up from poverty through giving me some purpose and giving me some understanding. And I had this very emotional, moving, awakening experience, or this glow in my heart that I then identified as this born again Christian, and
Mm.
spoke to God directly a lot, never heard anything back. But, had that feeling of, okay, so there's something there listening, there's something there that is allowing me to be heard. um, so I had all of these things lined up, and I was standing on the front porch of this house that I just bought in Atlanta on a double acre corner lot, and was waiting for my friends to come over. We're going to have a big party, and these stereo installers were going to come and hook everything up for the stereo that I was going to run. And I caught myself in a moment where I was looking out over the empty lot, thinking I could put a gazebo over there and wire it with sound, and wouldn't that be amazing? And so here I am in this moment, standing on this house that I just bought 10 years after being on food stamps. I bought this house with no cosigner, so that's you win the American dream.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
you've climbed the ladder of success, and you've got this monetary success, you've got this personal success, this interpersonal stuff. You get the and here I was catching myself in a moment of, I have all this stuff, and I'm already looking for something else.
Right.
So that was a real big epiphany of, holy cow, there's something else meaningful that's missing. What is that? And that's when I started the path down kind of this, can I make more money? Well, that won't help it. It's not going to be another like season tickets to the Braves game, or another trip to Vegas is not going to fill this hole of what it is that I'm missing. So
Did you
maybe
try
it's
another?
a
Did you try another house? I'm joking.
that's what we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah,
If you
it's
do,
the second
if you
house. It's the second one that'll
yes,
do it. Yeah,
it's the bigger house.
yeah,
It's, oh, wait, I need to trade in this spouse for a more attractive and younger one, right? Is
yeah.
typically what guys do. And yeah, so I knew, I was like, there's, okay, so I filled all these holes, and I'm not getting what I expected out of it. So then I started the introspection route again, and said, okay, what is it that I'm missing internally? And maybe it's my relationship with God isn't deep enough. Like, maybe I need a stronger relationship. And so I started to do I started reading the Bible again. Then I started doing a like an anthology of comparative religions study to figure out what the commonalities were in religions. And then I started reading a little bit about Zen in that practice of
Hmm.
DT Suzuki, introducing me to the idea of meditation. I didn't know what meditation was at the time. And so then I started to change my prayer routine a little bit with the Christianity. And I started to become quieter within my mind. I knew that meditation was kind of this space of, making your mind quieter, etc. So I started shortening my prayer, using fewer words. And I later discovered Martin Luther, his great quote was, the fewer the words, the better the prayer, because
Hmm.
you're supposed to be listening for God. You're not supposed to be
Hmm.
talking to God and asking for the lottery numbers and all these amazing things that you would love to have happen in your life. You're supposed to be becoming quiet. And I later learned that the whole reason that all of the monasteries in Europe, as many of them as there are, they were all built to train this one very sacred contemplative practice of the prayer of quiet,
Yes.
is what it was called. And basically, it's just a function of meditation. It's like you're supposed to listen for God, and in the event that everything aligns, God will speak to you and give you the answers, etc. So this is the ideas from a lot of ancient religions that I learned later. I was just kind of doing it naturally, trying to mix prayer with meditation to say, I'm going to listen more and see if God talks to me. And God didn't. Absolutely, for like weeks and weeks and weeks. But as I kept reading, I kept understanding a little bit more about these other disciplines and these other ancient practices. And the idea of meditation became a little more clear as I read DT Suzuki's perceptions of it. And I'd learned about this thing called Sattorii, where there can become this perfect moment in meditation where the entire universe kind of unfolds before you, and you understand everything that there is to know about everything. There's this pristine, perfect moment of understanding and becoming one with absolutely all of it. I had no idea, besides those words, what that meant. And so I changed my practice a little bit more. and I started to really quiet my mind and simply listen. It wasn't, I mean, the prayers became as short as thank you. And then that was it. The rest of it was holding that empty space open of allowing my mind to try to not think and calming it and just listening. And most of the time I fell asleep and would wake up the next day. But I did notice that during the times that I was able to like finish the meditation or finish the prayer, or whatever word you want to use, my mind was much quieter. My life was much calmer. I did feel a greater level of inner peace, even though I wasn't getting the answers that I had been seeking. So I kept doing it because I thought, if I'm getting any type of benefit from this, and this is
Yeah.
way before I studied the physiological effects of meditation, and there's whole tons of amazing health benefits that come about if you start a meditation practice.
For
So
sure.
anybody
For
listening
sure.
who doesn't have one, absolutely start one, because heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol levels, all the
Yeah.
amazing cool stuff like
Neurological
aligns.
benefits too. Yeah.
Oh, hugely, hugely. And as
Yeah.
little as like 20 minutes a week evoked amazing differences in blood profiles of meditators who are just meditating one day a week for 20 minutes, change their physiology. So if you can get more in, you'll accelerate that process. So that's kind of what I was doing. I was just like, clearing the mind, etc. And there was this one day that was different. And it started with this idea. I'd gotten into reading about Zen, although I wasn't a Zen practitioner. I was just reading about it, trying to figure out what the commonalities were, if anybody had any special secrets or whatever. And I read this, I guess it was just a little saying, a little koan, a little something or other that said, the master asked, yeah, Sean, uh, how does one meditate? And the master replied, by not thinking. And so then the monk asked Yeshan, well, how does one sit and not think? And the master said, by not thinking. And so it's kind of like every Zen koan I understand now is a big riddle that
Mm-hmm.
leads you in
Mm-hmm.
circular logic direction to where there
Yeah.
is no answer mentally. Although there's those jokesters that say, what's the sound of one hand clapping, and
Yeah.
they'll do this, right?
Right.
But the idea is, what is the sound of one hand clapping? There is no answer to that. Zen koan, you can't think your way to an enlightenment experience. You can't think your way to the internal experience that will then illuminate the things that you wish or need to know. It's always that internal state. And so I got the idea. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the 800-pound gorilla of my mind, and I'm going to turn it on the 800-pound gorilla of my mind, and I'm going to force myself into a state of not thinking. So it was kind of a vipassana, which, if you understand anything about meditation, is like a place where you simply observe your thoughts and you allow them to float through like clouds. And maybe you can name them, maybe you don't. Maybe you just watch them as they float through, or you're on another good analogy is you're on the train station pedestal, and the train comes through and makes a bunch of noise, but you don't get on it, right? You allow it to pass through and you're still on the pedestal. But if you find yourself on the train, like you're following your chain of thoughts, and you're, oh my gosh, this thing pops up in your mind, like, oh, I forgot that meeting I'm going to have tomorrow. I wonder what we're going to have for lunch, and I need to get this report done, or whatever it is. And you're off on that trail of thought. That's the moment that you can take control of your thoughts and pop yourself back onto that train platform, allowing the train through. Well, that's a passive, um, and somewhat active, but I mean, you're focusing your attention, but it's a passive, allow your thoughts to pass through. I wasn't doing that. I was being very forceful by saying, okay, here's the thought. That's, the dog barking across the street or whatever it is. And then I forcibly would kind of push it out of my awareness. So I was adamant that I was going to have a state of no thinking in my brain. And right before I started that whole process, a couple weeks previous, I'd just broken up with a girlfriend and was in that space of, Lord, I don't want to start dating again. And this,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
all this stuff piling up. And it's like, okay, so I've made all this money, and I have these friends and this success, and yeah. Why am I
Mm-hmm.
still lacking? What is it? So I was in that space of almost depletion to say, look, I'm disillusioned by this whole earth thing. If there's more for me to know, I'm ready. And that's the space that I left open and entered this meditation, which was then going to be forceful to say, all right, by God, if there's a magic here, I'm going to find it. And started to forcefully stop my mind from following any thoughts that would come up. And about 20 minutes in, I experienced a place of complete quietude in my mind, to where any additional thoughts that would come up from the perceptions, like, I'd hear a car outside, or I'd hear the dog barking from the neighbor's house, or um, a waft of air would hit my skin or something like that. And I identified all of those things as thoughts. Like, that was processed within the mind, that was distracting to whatever was going to go on within, which I had no idea what was possible or what would happen. And there became a spot where I was completely disassociated with the thoughts in my mind, to where I was literally sitting in a space of meta awareness up above my mind, watching the machinations of my mind. And at a point that it became quiet, it was the weirdest thing that I had ever experienced to date. Um, and it showed me the true relation between my consciousness and my mind, that they were a separate thing. And that was the first moment in my existence where I understood, oh, I am not my mind, I have a mind. Because if I'm able to look down upon this thing, it is separate from the observer that's observing what's going on. So that was a little hint, but I didn't get
Yeah.
to really sink into that lesson, because one of the amazing things that started to occur was, in that moment of complete quietude, this energy started to build within my awareness. And it really, I like to pinpoint it. It felt like it was almost behind me, but it felt like it was coming from within me at the same time. It's like it felt from like around my heart, or maybe a little below it. It was this buildup of a glow. And that's kind of the only way that I can explain the perception of what I was experiencing. It was like this
Mm-hmm.
warm glow of energy that was building in my heart. And I was like, well, this is interesting. And then this other thing behind me started to build. And But at the moment that I started to feel that energy, which initially was kind of nice, it started to grow in this exponential growth pattern. And let me clear something up for you. A lot of people use the word exponentially incorrectly. Like, they'll think, oh, a big sharp increase,
Mm-hmm.
hockey stick growth of a multiple or logarithmic growth. No, a true exponential growth is when you take something and you multiply it. You multiply every little bit of it
Mm-hmm.
times every little bit of it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it goes like a mind-blowing expansion that is beyond measurement almost at that point. Well, that's the kind of buildup that this energy started to create within me. And so it immediately went from oh, that's kind of interesting and nice, to holy shit, I am
Yeah.
scared. Like, there's this terror that arose, and I can understand now why it did, because the process of our mind, if you like, I wrote this whole book about it, but it's the Mind Hacking Happiness Red Book. It explains how your mind works to create your pain and suffering, which is part of the thing that I got to bring back from this whole experience. But the reason that I went into sheer terror at that moment was because my egoic existence is very defined in my mind. And when you have a perception that threatens that egoic existence, any portion of it or all of it, then fear arises as a internal reaction to give you distance and to run away from things that could harm you, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, in the space of that growing, what I can now understand as consciousness, in that space of growing awareness that I was about to learn, I was much more than this thing. I was much more than my body. I was much more than my mind machinations. I was much more than the mental attachments that I was having in my body. Like, the energy that was growing and creating in perception was going to attack and annihilate this. I was about to go through ego death. So there you go. There's the fear of the Lord, push, quote unquote. It
Yeah.
was a terrifying moment that my
Interesting.
existence was going to be annihilated,
Mm.
and I wanted no part of it. So I was
Yeah.
resisting the growth of the energy. I was resisting the consciousness that was filling my existence. All of my senses were immediately blocked. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't feel that I was lying on the bed anymore. Like, taste, sight, all of the things that my body would normally create were overwhelmed and overloaded, to the point where I had no attachment to them anymore. Um, and it kept going. And I felt this heat in my spine start to increase and rise as it was ascending in my spine. And I felt and saw this multi-spectral white light from within me grow so brightly that it filled all of my senses and overloaded me immediately. Couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything. This buzz of this seemingly resonant frequency. My body was vibrating on a molecular level. It was intense. And I absolutely did not know what was happening, but I did feel that I was losing my grasp on my body. So I thought, whoa, am I dying here? Am I having a heart attack? What's going on with this? And then so then the alarming reactions within my mind started to try to create thoughts that I was glomming onto to try to interrupt this whole process. I was like, I want no part of this. This is
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
way too much than I asked for. Like, I was just like, life has been amazing. It's been awesome. Things have been lining up for me, and I was just looking for a little bit more understanding. And this is not what I signed up
Hmm.
for.
So I don't
And
want to
so,
interrupt your story, but something's occurring to me right now that I just have to ask at this point because
sure.
I won't tell the Monroe Institute going out of body story again. I think everybody's heard that at this point, or if you haven't, that's all I'll say. I went out of body. It was mind blowing. But there was part of me after it happened that while, yes, I was meditating a lot that week, I was putting myself, I guess, in a position for something like that to happen. It still
Hmm.
almost felt like when I review it, it almost felt like there had to have been something that allowed it to happen. Like there had to have been something that said, "All right, let's give it to him." Like that's almost what it felt like. Like when you reflect on this now, do you I mean, knowing where the story goes, I think it would maybe make sense to assume that that's how you feel, but because people listening are like, "Okay, he's been meditating for months," but like maybe they're like, "I've been meditating for years and I've never had this experience." And I'll just stop there because I think maybe you'll answer this question. Do pardon the interloping, my friends. Can one interlope upon themselves? Uh, that is a brain tingler that we will save for another transmission. You may have noticed that I have shortened my introductions, yet tickling the algorithm, stimulating it in all ways does remain of the utmost importance. So please do like, subscribe, comment, share. I am trying to hit 200K subs at least before the end of the year. Also, we do have an ever swelling library of member only / patron only content, both on the YouTube members page and at patreon.com / third eye drops. If you do join via the latter, you'll also get access to a patron only Discord server and access to live mind melds with myself, occasional special guests, along with, of course, a number of other seekers just like yourself. I do hope to commune with you there, but in the meantime, back to the mind meld.
No, I did actually feel something else. That was the thing that kept me in, believe it or not, because I was looking for a way out of this immense
Mm-hmm.
energy growing. And just as I'm like, okay, trying to think of, can I get to my cell phone and call 911 and get somebody over here to shock me out of this, whatever it is, this huge booming voice came through
mm.
my own mind and said, let go. Okay, so I have my own consciousness. It's an individuated consciousness. The way I understand it now, it's one part of one inseparate field of consciousness. And I'm going to try to create a video in the next few months to try to explain how all of that comes to be and how physics then becomes the emergent property of that consciousness. But there was a separation there. There was a different conscious entity sending me some message from somewhere else other than what I was and what I was experiencing to say let go. So that was interesting. My immediate reaction to that let go message was, yeah, fuck that. I'm
Yeah.
not letting go. I got too much stuff going on here on the planet. I got, my mom's still here. I got to take care of her. I got all these plans. I'm doing so well in this life discovery process. And, I've got these wins as far as the American dream is concerned, and all I have to do is figure out this internal puzzle that I haven't figured out, and then everything will be awesome. So I want to stick around here. And the energy it's still going, it's still accelerating out of control. And I get this second message. It seems like it comes from the universe itself. Like every atom in existence screams to me and vibrates and delivers this message, let go. And it is literally the mind, the voice of God from my perspective, right? It's like everything is saying, let go. Like everything across the universe is telling me, let go. And ashamedly, I'm like, yeah, that's really convincing, but nah. I'm not thinking about letting go of this yet. And that was the internal wiring, right? That was the internal body trying to defend its existence. And I understand that now, to say, I'm attached to these things. I'm attached to this idea of self. I'm attached to this body. I'm attached to all of these things, and I don't want to give these things up. But then a third moment came through where that same presence, and it was almost like it was another version of me, but it was something that I had known since the beginning of time. Almost like myself coming up from behind me, putting my arms around myself and whispering in my own ear. It was that familiar. It was, let go. It was like here's the real delivery of the message. And at that point, the familiarity and the love that passed over me and passed through me and became me, at that point, it was absolute, no resistance at all. It was, oh, I forgot you. I forgot this. I forgot, but okay, let's go. And it was that point that there's this, this big arising. There was this huge pressure within my head that was feeling like almost, I can feel it now. It's like painful, where this, I learned later it's Kundalini energy or whatever the word is they want to put to it. But they basically this huge buildup and this pressure on the top of my skull, and it felt like it was going to explode. I was in pain. That popped through the top of my skull with a audible pop. It was like and then like my, I don't know, spiritual energy or whatever it is, flowered out of the top of my head and got it sucked into this vortex of energy that was building behind me the whole time, that kind of de-atomized my existence. And I was leaving Earth. I was leaving my body. At that moment, had you asked me a million times whether I was dying or going off to have some spiritual experience, a million times I would have said I'm dying. This is me going off. I'm no longer going to be this Sean person on planet Earth, and this is over. I'm having a heart attack or whatever it is, but it's okay. Everything's fine. Everyone that I'm going to leave behind is going to be okay. They're going to be with this energy in just a couple of seconds anyway, from the perspective of, human life being so short, and the illusion of pain and suffering and all that other stuff. It's like all of it was okay. And so I let go and immediately went through I don't know if I was expecting this or not, but it kind of fits the narration of the death experience that people can have, where you go through this life review. I went through this white multispectral light into the vortex of energy, was gone from Earth, popped up in the middle of nowhere in the star field, and then started to have a life review of all the moments in my life that I had forgotten, where I had some kind of a lesson to learn. And that took like seemingly weeks, where I was going through the experiences of my life, where I had lessons to learn, starting from the time that I was a baby and being held by my mom in this circle of people. And I was able to go through the minds and the emotions of all the people around me as I'm being held, wondering when lunch is, next to my mom's boob. And I'm feeling their reactions to my presence, and I'm feeling their thoughts about my existence as a baby, and I'm feeling my mom's thoughts and emotions. And it was like I was reliving that experience, and every experience that I had after that moment, I relived not from my perspective, but from the perspective of everyone else around me. And that's when I started to go through all of the stuff that I needed to learn, and literally was kind of being drugged through the dirt.
Yeah.
It was, experience after experience after experience of me being selfish, me being stupid, me being ignorant, me causing harm to someone else, and I got to feel it. I got to feel how deep I cut my dad when I said some off the hip remark when I was a teenager that was designed to, end the conversation or whatever, but it
Yeah.
literally destroyed him. And I got to see all of the, like, there was a girlfriend that I had forgotten that I even went out with that was part of this whole long, super long string of experiences, that it was a 2-week relationship for me. And I wasn't that into her. And I'd just broken up with her. She was fucking devastated.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no clue that I was doing that to her. First of all, I couldn't remember that I even gone out with this girl, but I went through this experience that I relived that moment of, on my side, it's like, I just need to cut this off for her and me, and, et cetera. And she was devastated on the other end for whatever reasons. Like, I think she made a connection to me that was too deep or whatever in a short amount of time. But at the same time, it's like, it didn't matter. The reality of that existence was I was callous. I was not empathetic or compassionate to her or what this situation could create for her. And it was a lesson that I was supposed to learn. And it was just one of those after another one of those after another one of those for
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah.
And I was destroyed at the end of it. I was just like, oh, so this is why I'm going to hell. Right. So I'm like, holy shit. Because, I'm still like a little attached to the only things that I know, which is the story of heaven and hell, and being good versus not being good, and all this other stuff, and that you're going to be judged. And I'm like, okay, well, I must be passing through this judgment thing. And I get this message, all is forgiven. And I felt this love of unconditional acceptance and forgiveness after that string of horrible uh, actions and reactions from my existence in my life that were less than optimal, to say the least. And that blew my mind. I could not fathom the amount of pain that I'd caused simply being forgiven. And I kind of doubted that for a second, like, how is that possible? And it's at that moment that I was taken involuntarily on a string of other instances that seemed more real than real, like more palatable, more visceral, more everything than all of the space-time stuff we react to and experience now. Of all of these other instances that seemed like they were live, like they were happening live around the planet, of people doing selfish and thoughtless things that they thought were just fine, or maybe they knew that they weren't, but at the same time those things were immediately being forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that really stuck with me was the first one that really drove it home. I was thrown into a little village. It seemed like it was in North Africa somewhere, inside this hut, and there were these militia members who were inside, and I will spare the details, but they were physically mistreating this woman who was in complete agony. Her children were dead outside. She was praying for death, and her thoughts were with her children. And she was at the moment, like, you could feel her body losing grasp of its life force. And the whole scene was permeated with this immense unconditional love, not just for the woman, because that was absolute. And the focus on her pain and suffering was complete. And it was full of empathy and full of compassion and full of, a feeling of this is going to be over for her momentarily. And she's going to be back with consciousness and everything's going to be fine. And this pain is temporary. But the thing that drove it home, to make a longer story short, was when the focus moved from her pain and suffering to the actions of the gorillas who were mistreating her, the feeling of love and acceptance and forgiveness did not change. Their actions as well were immediately being forgiven because the message was they are as separate consciously from God, from awareness, from consciousness, than she is. Like if she had that connection into God, she would know everything was okay. She was about to pass through into what exists beyond. And this would be a temporary experience for her that would alleviate some of her pain and suffering. That broke my mind because when the camera swung around, it was unconditional love and forgiveness of their existence as well, because they were so separate from God. They were in their own framing of pain and suffering that put them in the position to take the actions that they were taking, and they were completely separate. And that was the compassion from the consciousness, was all of this is occurring because we're not connected and we've forgotten our divinity and the connection to consciousness within ourselves. And so then it was a whole other string of a whole bunch of stuff, like a bunch of deeply profound stuff, to the point of a very entitled ice skater grabbing her skates off of a shelf and not paying for the guy who sharpened those skates, etc. Like a
Wow.
bunch of self-serving bullshit that
Just
was just
very
piled up,
random.
random,
Yeah.
crazy, simple stuff, along with some amazingly profound, moving, jarring things. Uh, and all of it was forgiven, because it was all, these people forgot that they're part of the big thing, and we're supposed to be helping each other, and we're supposed to be loving each other, and as other parts of existence, like as part of the big whole of everything, we're supposed to be treating each other kindly. And these people are disconnected from that, and they're suffering. Right. So that kind of gives us an idea of where this came from, of this source energy that was just like, I love absolutely all of it. I love absolutely every bit of it. And the malady that is causing these people to mistreat this person, I want them clear of that. But that was kind of the lesson. And from there, after I received all the lessons about forgiveness is absolute and forgiveness is simply part of the whole thing that becomes this uh, infinite unconditional love basis for all of existence, then I landed in a spot that was okay. So now I understand why my life's actions had been forgiven, and I understand ultimate forgiveness and unconditional love. Then this same entity, this same separate consciousness asked me, okay, so what do you want to know? Like originally answering the question that I'd started the original prayer with a long time ago before I died and came off here to heaven or whatever it was. Like, if there's more for you,
Yeah.
if there's more for me to know, what is it? I'm ready. Someone on the other end was like, okay, so what is it you want to know? And it was at that moment that I did the stupidest thing ever, and called it on its bluff and said, oh, well, okay, Mr. Disembodied Consciousness, looking to answer my question, you're going to ask me what I want to know, I'll bite. Everything is what I said. And at that moment I learned the age old saying, the wisdom behind the age old saying, be careful what you wait for, because you just might get it. Absolutely all of the intelligence of the universe started ripping through me at beyond light speed, threatening to deatomize the existence of my consciousness into nothingness. Like I was about to be simply vaporized into non-existence by the amount of information that was screaming through me at the moment. And
Yeah.
I started to understand, okay, there's a lot more than I know, that I could know, that I don't have the possibility or the capability of knowing. And it was a lesson in humility. And even before I could like eke out this thought of, oh my God, too much, slow it down or whatever, it did attenuate at that moment down to a speed that I could at least wrap some consciousness around, wrap my mind around the understanding and knowing of things. And there's some things that I was shown that was, they're still beyond my conscious capability, my intelligence at this point that I still can't unpack. But there was a magic there that I started to understand the secrets of black holes and multidimensionality and all the stuff is and how it comes to be, and the substrata that creates the space-time universe around us was revealed and laid bare, and I understood it all to the point like I'd designed it almost. It was the weirdest feeling ever. And then from there, after expanding and exploring the macro of all of existence at a galactic and beyond galactic universal scale, where I get to see everything is circular, and you go in a straight line, you can come back to the same exact spot on the other side. It's really cool. All these really, really cool stuff built into universal structure. Then I got to a tour, and I got to start zooming down into the micro scales, down to the level of the individual cells, and seeing cellular activity in the human body and other bodies that are non-human. And then got to see the chemical and molecular interchanges where it rips into the field energy, and exchanges of heat and light and photons and things like that are occurring in the reorganization of the data of the molecule. And I went through chemistry classes in college and never understood chemistry as well as I did when I was able to go down there and actually see it happening at the molecular level. It was amazing,
Wow.
beautiful. And then down below that, you go down into seeing the particle, quote unquote, the particle exchanges, which I didn't understand. Like I went through college classes and high school classes that told me that these were bits of things and they were solid, and I was able to witness how they weren't. I was just like these kind of these interactions of multidimensional field energies that
Yeah.
then have a resistance and an energy structure and a signature and a reactivity built into it based on the intelligence and wisdom of the whole system. But I got to see how particles weren't a thing, and how it was just energy and energy exchange and energy vibration and energy resisting interacting with other energies, and because it didn't hit the keyhole at a certain angle or something like that. It was really interesting to see all that stuff. And then I zoomed down even further, and there were a mind-bogglingly, flabbergastingly, uh, um, like surprising amount of layers between these layers, where these molecular energies show up, but down towards the Planck length, where you get down to the Planck length and you go one step lower and everything goes infinite,
Yeah.
top to bottom to top to bottom. It's amazing structure that was just shown to me. Like, and I came back and I felt sad and still feel sad that these super geniuses of the world who are working on these intractable problems, like, this is the experience that they need.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
go see how it works.
Yeah. And just to interject again, often I ask a guest anytime these ancient wisdom traditions come up in conversation, I ask them, clearly we know they did not have the type of mathematical and physics and technical knowledge sets that we have now. Yet they were arriving at similar conclusions using different, more poetic language that are so consistent with our findings of the last 100 years through things like quantum theory that you have to ask the question, how were they finding this knowledge? And the answer always comes back, well, it seems like it's got to be some contemplative thing. And your experience illustrates that so well, right? If you try to put yourself back 1,000 years or 2,000 years, and you have the exact same experience phenomenologically that you had, and you have to put it in that archaic language, sans any of our mathematical psychotechnologies or whatever, that's what it would sound like. So to me, this is just such a perfect illustration of what that must have been like.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. And I think a lot of the discoveries, I mean, even back to Newton, right? I
Yeah,
mean, the guy was a an alchemist and believed in the occult, and wanted to do inner
totally.
consciousness expansion exercises and things. And well, because that's where you pull the magic and the answers of the universe and how it's structured into our understanding. As you go
Hmm.
into that space and you experience it and you see it, just like Einstein did with his Gedanken experiments. He had no idea how the whole thing works until he went
Right.
inside of himself and said, "Okay, let me look at this."
Yep.
And he talks about spiritual experience and the mystical as being the most of the most important of the experiences, because that's where you get the biggest inspiration. That's where you get the biggest answers. I mean, Tesla was in that same
Oh
spot of,
yeah. Oh yeah.
accessing the internal and speaking to consciousness entities that exist just beyond the physical to give him the
Yeah.
answers. It's like we're not super genius intellects that can piece this stuff together from past work. I mean, it's always that magic inspiration that comes that provides that quantum leap. Well, that's got to come from somewhere.
Yep.
And for the material, I mean, it makes me sad that there are so many materialist super geniuses out there who won't look beyond space time because they can't mathematize the model or create an algorithm for the understanding of consciousness or even measure consciousness, because it's something that goes beyond space time capability of measurement, right?
Right.
And they just abandon that whole line of thinking because they're so entrenched with the indoctrination of this is how you're
Hmm.
supposed to think, this is how you're supposed to discover, you're supposed to look upon stand upon the shoulders of giants that came before you and take a piece of their work and figure out how the patterns come together, etc. And then you make a new discovery and you test it,
Yeah.
or you new theory and you test it, yada yada yada. It's never go within and see how it works and then
Totally.
come out with it.
Yeah, and that's why people, and that's why people like Federico Fagin and Don Hoffman and Bernardo Kastrup are so compelling, because they are some of the few minds that are on that level intellectually, technically, mathematically, and they're also willing to go into consciousness and see what insights that yields. And I think, Mike, again, not to sidetrack the story, because I do want you to finish before I start blathering on, but that's what excites me about what's on the horizon of science and philosophy, is that there are this small cadre of classically trained in their discipline super geniuses who are starting to take these things seriously. Meditation, psychedelics, whatever method of achieving deep states of consciousness, as something that is not antithetical to the scientific method or to, empirical knowledge acquisition, but enhancing to that. And I think once we collectively agree on that, I think massive breakthroughs are going to happen.
I agree with you, and I really hope that that's the case. That these super geniuses are getting on the bandwagon of inner exploration and talking about potentially using psychedelics to assist that process. I mean, because I brought some stuff back, right? Long story short, like I went through thousands of years of experience from like I literally thought I was dead and I was really just open to experiencing anything. And so a whole bunch of amazing things happened. I got to see the macro, I got to see the micro. Then I went on to live multiple lives in the process of learning more about physiology and conscious existence and how it ties all in, etc. And I understand, I got to travel all over the universe and see a whole bunch of amazing things and understand that consciousness is this the channel of communication and transportation at times, because you're basically just transporting data across into different instances of or different locations in space time, etc. It's really cool stuff. But when I was coming back, I understood all of this stuff, had all of these experiences, and got this message. Okay, so it's time to go back to Earth, and I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I have a responsibility to go be another human baby and go do this next thing that I just had experienced multiple lives previously of passing through the whole life, and sometimes uh, dying as expected, sometimes being hit by a bus. Amazing, way cool things. Countless number of lives that I've experienced in between. And I thought, okay, well, time to go back and be another baby, I guess. And then it came to my awareness that I was coming back I saw my body laying on my bed in my house from way far away, from like far away from the earth. And I thought, oh, hell no. I'm absolutely not, like, I forgot, like, no, I died from that long time
Yeah.
ago. We're not,
Yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
going back to that. That was a fail. And, and I got the message, no, you're going back. And but I started losing all the understanding of all the black holes and all the multidimensionality and all the cool stuff that I'm trying to re-wrap my mind around at this point.
Hmm.
um and I said, I'm not going back to that without this, like without this knowledge, without this stuff that I'd experienced, so that I can make positive changes in my life, in the planet, and help people uh have this amazing experience. And so that's when I started this negotiation. But long story short, I brought back stuff that then was validated by science as being brand new and helpful to humanity. Machinations of, the whole bunch of, like, I came up with this theory of how pain and suffering works and how the human mind works, etc. And I was just that guy with another theory. But then all of a sudden, between 2007 and 2014, all of the science came together that proved every bit of the model that I'd put together to be correct. But then the magic moment when I was when I was on the phone with Ross Picard at MIT, who'd started effective computing at the MIT Media Lab, and who's one of the probably single most qualified expert in the world regarding models of human emotion and cognitive catalysis of human emotion, et cetera. And she validated, she was like, no one else, because I was looking to have the conversation. I was like, tell me what I missed. Who's the expert that I missed? Tell me the book that I read. I can't be the person who brought this magic back from, a fever dream. And she's like, no, this is actually new stuff. It's very related to some work of her colleagues that she gave me cell phone numbers for and whatnot. And she said it is brand new, and you need to publish something before somebody steals this, because this is probably the best model for the cognitive catalysis of human emotion that I've seen. At least elegant from a mathematical perspective. It can't be simplified more. And that started the whole domino effect of me working on that model. And then ultimately, the denouement is I presented that model and our tests in AI of emotional intelligence and theory of mind at the Science of Consciousness conference in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago, where AI absolutely confirmed that this is the leading model that we have for explaining the process of the creation of pain and suffering in the human mind, and can allow for an artificial intelligence to have emotional intelligence, including artificial empathy and artificial compassion, which are simply, I understand your pain and I want to help you out of that pain. And then the math that can allow for the perception creation to allow for an individual user to have a reduction of pain from the AI's perspective and the AI's input. It's amazing, cool stuff.
Wow.
Long story short, I brought that back from this experience and unpacked it over a number of years. That's super interesting. I'm the village idiot, right? As far as, like, I'm smart, but as in comparison to these super geniuses like Eric Weinstein and those types of folks who can exceptionally
on another
complex
level.
pattern recognition on, they're like just aliens as far as we're concerned on intelligence level. Like, if I get something, being stupid boy who can come back and wrap a system around of my experience and come up with something new that's useful for humanity, to not only, I mean, the magic of the mind hacking happiness stuff is when you put your attention to the two variables that create all of your pain and suffering, all of a sudden there's a thick black curtain that comes down in between you and the reactivity of your mind. And there's also this right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex and this medial prefrontal cortex circuit that literally turns your limbic system down in real time. Involuntarily, you can't even help it from happening. So your pain and suffering is reduced from a cheap tricks of neuroscience perspective based on understanding the process. And like, I brought all that back. None of that came from this.
Right.
All of it came from what I was able to experience by dipping within.
Wow.
If we can get those super genius folks on this train to say, I'm going to go into that same space that Newton did. I'm going to go into that same space that Einstein did. I'm going to go into that same space that Tesla did. Then they're going to have their own shot at their Nobel. They're going to have their own shot at actually pushing something forward that they can bring forth that is brand new, inspirational from a accuracy of the definition of the term perspective, and do something of import. I mean, and that's going to benefit humanity. So, I mean, this is probably the most important message of the 21st century, is look within to find the answers, because the intelligence of the universe is there, or the universe wouldn't exist. Right? Like, get there, man. Like, experience that internal thing. I think that's what we're supposed to be doing. And as we connect into that, by the way, everything else goes infinite as well. Like your connection into other consciousnesses, your connection into other people, your ability to see into the minds of other folks, to have an increase in your own empathy and compassion, which reduces the amount of pain and suffering that you're experiencing, because you understand the process. And even if it's a complex process within yourself, you can throw a wrench in that process if you understand it to break your pain and suffering, which is amazing. But then you can also understand the pain and suffering process within somebody else, raise your level of empathy, compassion, and make the world a better place.
Yeah.
It's like, What
Yeah,
am I
and it's
missing? You know?
well, yeah, yeah, and I think what we're all missing is that for whatever reason, through whatever ontological twist of happenstance, we come here as human beings. And
Yeah.
there are endless stories. Like as unbelievable as your story is, there are thousands of them that are
Yeah.
documented throughout history. Many people who have had NDEs, many people who have had mind-blowing psychedelic experiences just on the natch non-dual experiences like Federico Fagin or whoever. But for whatever reason, everyday consciousness is not only partitioned from that experience, we have lost consistent technologies to access whatever that knowing is, to a point where I think most people feel completely orphaned from that. And when you feel completely orphaned from that, you can live from this self concerned, egotistical perspective that allows you to, in extreme cases, go all the way on up to doing like the war crimes you described in that like North African village and the other evil shit that's going on in the world right now. And it's just so, it seems like such a cruel twist of destiny, right? That's the state that we're in, because it seems like there's a way out. It seems like there's a way to not be in that state, but we've lost the literacy in how to access it. And
Yeah.
I think there was probably a point in time where we were more connected, where we did have temples and maybe potions, molecules, plant technologies, maybe a synthesis of the two to reach these higher states of knowing, what I think are probably higher beings as well, higher archetypal intelligences that
Yeah.
could reconnect you with these things under different sorts of like initiatic experiences. But we don't have that anymore. I'm hopeful that these things will eventually percolate back to the surface and we'll have ways to access this. But I mean, that's all speculative for now. But what's and maybe this is speculative too, but for one, we've gone an hour and 10 minutes. I haven't asked you a single question about entities or what could be whatever. So I want to fucking shift gears into that, because I
Sure.
know you have interesting insights on that question, on this question of non-human intelligence, on this question of entities. What, some people think are aliens, some people think are ultra terrestrials, some people use more expressly spiritual terminology. And some of that insight came out of this experience, and I think some of that insight came from other pieces of knowledge you have, and other wisdom. But so I guess to more skillfully shift gears into that, how did this experience and then everything downstream of that start to shift your view of reality, of your consciousness, the sort of ecology of other consciousnesses that's out there? What do you think we're really looking at? And then maybe you could shift into, what do you think we're really seeing when we are seeing what seem to be these discrete other intelligences, and how does that fit into this whole?
Yeah. So, and this connects with some of the spelunking that I've done, I guess, more recently over the last couple of decades, of exploring the minutia in between. Like there's this moment of sliding all the way up to the top through consciousness to being God adjacent, it seemed.
Right.
And then God kind of stepped away and said, "Hey, I got to go take a piss. You want to run the place? You want to drive?" And in that moment, you step into being absolutely everything, the unit of consciousness, and you realize how absolutely everything in the universe works. And then you understand its perfection in how you don't have to change a thing because it is all perfect in every moment. So that was amazing. Um, but what you learn though through that experience is the complexion of consciousess kind of looks like, and of course, this is going to make sense for a lot of people. Those pictures where you have the brain neurons mapped out, and then you have a picture right next to it that is the cosmos and its
Yeah.
connectivity, and they're almost indiscernible their pattern. Consciousness kind of has this same patterning from my perspective, and of course, I want to remind everybody back to the first thing that we said. Take everything that I say with a big old salt shaker. It might not be true. Who knows? It's just, my meat soup is trying to what makes sense of the perceptions that I had. So
Mm.
this
Meat
consciousness,
suit plus meat soup. I mean, that's a good appetizer. We don't.
yeah, until you see it in a blender.
Ooh.
Um, so, there's this structure that seems to mimic, or at least be maybe the foundational substrata, which is why everything looks the way it does in the complexity of the assembly of neurons and the assembly of uh, celestial bodies. Uh,
Yeah.
there's this structure similar in consciousness that becomes that's part of the one whole thing. But and so if you think about the one individuated field of consciousness, it's going to be full of data, certainly. Like all of the data of the universe, all of the potential for the rules of space-time already exist there, or space-time couldn't exist as the substrata or the emergent property of the substrata. So there's this complex pattern that consciousness falls into based on the structure and the organization of the data. Or data is just data, organized data is intelligence, and the
Hmm.
application of intelligence over time is wisdom. So now before time, you have infinite intelligence and infinite data. But you can have patterns within that data that then create the opportunities for smaller bits of consciousness or smaller perception points to look back at the whole. And Federico Fagin's idea, which I agree with, is the entirety of the universe and all of existence started when the one wanted to know itself,
Mm.
which I think is a beautiful idea. That, but then that spawns off a whole thought process of, okay, so what happens at that moment? That the thing that is everything, that is all the data in the universe, that is all the consciousness in the universe without bounds, wants to know itself. What has to happen? Well, any creation that exists must happen within the field itself, must happen inside of all of the unified field, or it's going to be something that's external and is no longer under the control of like the unitive field. So even if you try to control or try to create something outside of yourself, it immediately becomes part of what's inside yourself, and it's part of the all that exists. And it's the inseparate field of consciousness that also contains all the data, which then can become infinite intelligence and infinite wisdom based on additions of creation. But what's the first moment of creation? Well, you have to take a subset of your own data. You have to take a subset of who and what you are to create a separate perception base that then can then look back upon the whole to see yourself, to another place from which to look. You have to create a pseudo separation within the entire unified field that is a subset of the data that then, because of consciousness being a portion of the whole field itself, is in itself conscious. So it becomes another portion of consciousness based on a subset of the data that it's accessing. Doesn't access, it has ability to reach into and see all of the data, but it doesn't have as a portion of its excuse me, its existence, the data itself. So at the point that you're creating a subset of data, the first moment of creation, you're creating a companion, a partner
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
smaller than you, yet has the perception to act on the data that's subset
Hmm.
and become a new entity. And from there, that intelligence also has the creative power to create subsets of its own data and et cetera. And
Yeah.
so now you're starting to flower out into the
Yes.
pattern, let's say, of a tree root,
Yes.
where you've got the big trunk that's the portion of the whole thing, and you've got limbs spreading out all over the top, and leaves and the minutia that exists above the ground. Then you got the minutia that exists below the ground, etc. So now you've got a creative pattern that's starting to create more and more smaller versions out of the one field that then become different perception points for the one to experience itself. So all the poetic lineage that suggests that we are the universe looking back upon itself, that's how that becomes a truth. That's how that becomes a reality, is that we're becoming a subset of a smaller grouping of data from a larger grouping of data, that we're then the experience of that smaller grouping of data. So in this creation of this cascade, you have the little cilia out at the end, which I think we are, that are just experiencing a small portion of existence of space time, but yet we're part of the whole conscious structure and the
Yeah.
oneness of the consciousness that comes in and imbibes us with that magic life force that motivating intelligence that takes two cells and creates a brand new human baby body in 9 months that is inclusive of one of the most complex logic systems that we know of in our brain. um, it provides that intelligence to for those two little cells to come together and create that magic based on being a part of the one unitive indivisible field of consciousness, yet that has its own local experience based on the grouping of data, the subgrouping of data that becomes who and what we are, if that makes sense.
It
I'm
does,
trying to
yeah.
put a whole bunch of words to a really complex
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
vision in my head
how
that
do you
may or may not
explain?
be right.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, what we're diving into is like a very classic metaphysics problem, which is, a lot of these ancient wisdom traditions come to the conclusion that the truth of reality is that we're all one, right?
Yeah,
There's some fundamental oneness at the base of reality. But then that
absolutely.
creates this what's classically known as the problem of the one and the many, right? Like, how does the one become the many? And the only thing that makes sense is like either some kind of emanationist sort of uh ontos, I guess, where you at the most fundamental layer of reality, it is one, but then that somehow in a sort of holographic way instantiates itself into this fractured or fractal sort of expression of self, that then on that next layer or that next dimension of reality, these things play out as separate parts. But they're all one underneath that. But on
Yep.
top of that, they're playing out this drama. And then that probably just continues and continues and continues in some kind of like platonic or, metaphysical chain where, I love looking at these like really complicated, deep metaphysical views of reality by people like Proclus, who have all these metaphysical, um, you know, hierarchical consciousnesses that go back to that indescribable oneness at the very top. And of
Yeah.
course, these things, like the things at the top of this, could be called gods or hypercosmic gods. And then off of those things emanate other things and other things and other things until we get down to this level or up to this level, depending which direction you
Right.
want to go, from the bottom or the top. And
Right.
yeah, that type of general thing just intuitively and logically feels the best, at least to my bias and to my weird experiences.
Yeah. I mean, and it makes sense that, if consciousness is the fundamental thing, and I'm going to try to create a video that helps explain the big vision of that. But, there are these, like the fathers of quantum mechanics, most of them all believed that consciousness was the thing you couldn't get behind.
Yeah.
Like it was literally the cause and the substrata of all of the emergent property of space time and all the fundamental characteristics of the universe that we see around us come from consciousness, etc. Well, if you're talking about that huge subset or that huge data structure of consciousness that then becomes the multiple levels, you now start to understand, okay, so this big branch with all of these tendrils under it is a collective consciousness. It's an
Yes.
individuated consciousness that can be identified from the separation of the rest of the structure, but at the same time it's all part of the structure, it's one with the structure. But then you're starting to understand collective consciousnesses and god level awarenesses or power levels, or the ability to, like, if you start to understand consciousness as the thing that can literally reach into space-time and change the data and transmute things and teleport
Hmm.
things and jump through space-time to be able to discern, like remote viewing,
Yeah.
different portions of space-time without your physical interaction with that space, you start to understand how the complexity of consciousness can explain all of the amazing stuff that we're observing around ourselves, to include quantum computing. With the Google's latest chip does that 10 septillion year problem in 5 minutes or whatever it was, 15 minutes
Yeah.
at
I
max,
don't
but
know.
whatever it was. I mean, you're dipping into, when you're talking about a chip that can dip into the beyond space time, you're dipping into that consciousness that is beyond time period. And so it's not a big question of how it's done. I mean, they theorized without a lot of thought that they're like, oh, well, we're dipping into multiverse and borrowing
Right.
their
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
computational. It's like, okay, no, not really, because then you're leaving them an energy deficit that you have to account for, et cetera. But when you start if you look at it from a different perspective, to say that chip is dipping into the non-local field of consciousness. Well, that's infinite intelligence, and you have all the time in the universe, literally, because there is no time in that space to do your computations and come back with a 10 septillion year problem in 5 minutes, because
Right.
all of it is plugged in, and all of it is intelligent, and all of it is the intelligence that creates not only the activity of what's going on within us and the two cells that come together that create a brand new baby body. you know how do two individual cells have that amount of intelligence? They don't. You pull it from the field. And shout out to Stu Hammeroff and
Mm-hmm,
Roger
mm-hmm,
Penrose. I
mm-hmm.
think it might be microtubules play into that, because we all have microtubules in all of our cells that
Yeah.
might imbue our consciousness from the non-local field. So that might be
Yeah.
how in the place we get it. But
And
when
I
you
think they're in like
realize,
every eukaryotic cell. I think so. I think
yeah,
like theoretically, like everything has these microtubules, which could be the interface for consciousness bridging into the local physical.
yeah, and that could be a band-aid description that we're
Sure.
putting on a problem that could include plasma and all of these
Yeah.
amazing
Yeah. Right.
new sciences that we're learning about now, right? So we have no idea how complex it is, and as a person who's seen it and can tell you that we can't wrap our minds around it, we can't wrap our minds around it. The
Yeah.
reality of how it all works and stuff. We're never going to have an algorithmic math that explains consciousness. So Roger's correct, and so are most of the geniuses in the past who said you just can't get behind consciousness. It's the magic that from which all space-time stuff
Yeah.
springs forth, and
Right.
all the non-space-time stuff springs forth from that as well. All the substrata
Yeah.
that helps create the structure that the universe is built from, all springs from consciousness as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The thing Penrose always says is non-computational. There has to be something
Yeah,
non-computational about consciousness. And then you wrap your mind around, well, what does that even mean? Like it means something that's not just yielding, that's not just a collision of informational values that then gives rise to something else that we call consciousness. It's something deeper than that. So maybe it's
yeah,
something subjective. Maybe it's something, you know, just some kind of like fundamental pixel of wisdoming or phenomenology that just cannot be gone beneath, because that is the structure, that is the substructure or something.
yeah. And as you explore that complexity, that's when you start to answer the questions of, okay, so where do we fit
Yes,
in
yes,
the
thank you.
conscious awareness?
Yes,
So we're down here at the cilia, and then other things also plug into consciousness. And if they're plugging in at a little bit of a higher level, they'll have access to a little more information because they're a little farther up the trunk of the tree. Even though we're still way down in the dirt, you want to talk about non-human intelligence and the ability to reach in from mind into a mind to convey thoughts and emotions and ideas
right.
without any verbal communication. Well, now you're talking about something that's just up here that can influence matter a little bit better than we can, because if consciousness is the thing that can influence matter and collapse the wave function in our current vernacular, which of course quantum physics is not robust enough to explain all of it. It's going to have to be revamped and expanded, etc. And we may never, as a conscious entity at a human intelligence level, understand multidimensionality, because we can't wrap our minds around anything more than three, possibly four dimensions as we stretch our thinking. But there are a bunch more. So, at the level that you're higher in consciousness, you're controlling more matter at a higher level, at a higher energy level, which gives you more control over being able to jump from here to here through consciousness, etc., or to inhabit a body or not inhabit a body, or sometimes inhabit a body, or materialize a body when you want to interact in space time. So now you start to understand the complexities, and inclusive of, like, when you're talking about non-human, let's talk about just the struggle of the binary decision of human or other, right? So
Yep.
we have the human experience, and so we'll split it into that to say, okay, so we have the human experience, we understand what the human experience is, and it's limited, etc. Other. Now you're talking about not just other physical non-humans down here who also are imbued with consciousness and maybe just are a little bit of ahead of us from a technology perspective, maybe a little bit ahead of us from a conscious development perspective. They put thoughts into our minds or read our minds, that type of thing. But now you're talking about every conscious entity, all the way up to a God adjacent, to where you're
Right.
talking about, the divine stuff up here,
Yeah.
maybe some really highly developed conscious non-human entities here that we would use the word alien for, that are more divine, because the closer you get to the top, the more of the collective consciousness that you're plugged into, and you start to get more of that energy. You start to get more of that love. You start to, and of course, there's sine waves, and so there's going to be service to others and service to self, which is kind of a simple delineation to say good and evil. Like you're serving the greater good versus you're completely serving
Right.
yourself and your whims and your crazy thoughts and chaos that exists within thought functions and that type of thing. So, you can split those up and still be within the conscious activity. Well, when you go up and down that stack, you start to understand, okay, so we're just down here in this physical
Yeah.
body with this limitation of what we can process, so that we're not plugged into infinity, because it would just overwhelm our limited physiology and our limited intelligences. But there are other things who can plug into that more, maybe because their physiology is a little bit better than
Hmm.
ours on being able to interface and interact with consciousness. Maybe there are things who are based in consciousness that can choose to
Yes.
have a physical
Yes.
manifestation when they need
Yes.
to, when they need to interact with creatures in space time who are limited by their ability to understand and to plug in. It would be too overwhelming for them to interface with the higher level of consciousness. So they need something they can look to and point to and say, ooh, alien.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just so much in this that I want to quickly acknowledge, which is like, one, this sort of addresses the dark forest problem, right? Like, well, where is all the alien life? Why is it just us? And it's like, well, you're looking in the wrong place with the wrong tools, perhaps. Maybe the
Right.
tools that we need to be looking with are not telescopes and radio waves and our little, band of the electromagnetic spectrum that we acknowledge as being real through Maxwell's equations, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it lies in raw experience and honing your consciousness or learning how to modulate your consciousness in such a way that it allows you to access those other fields, those other levels on the ontological tree. And then the questions off of that, if you take that notion seriously, start to really fractal out. And one of the questions that I've been, so obsessed with ever since I mean, in some ways, I hate that I talk about Jake Barber on so many podcasts, because it's just like, it's just one of so many stories. But he's really the one who came out as this, credible, highly credentialed whistleblower, directly saying, like, this hard nosed military special ops guy saying, yes, there are people who can do that.
Hmm.
Like, we've been working with those people for a long time. And then, at least in this little milieu, the idea of psionic assets goes kind of viral, right? That there are these
Right.
people who figured out how to do that, or have a way of doing that, at least roughly. And then that allows them to connect to these other higher consciousnesses. And that sometimes manifests in something physical showing up, like some kind of physical thing showing up. So to try to like sculpt this down into a question for you is, do you think that's a thing? Do you think there really are these psionic assets? And let's just start there.
Yes. Uh, Next question. No, I'm kidding. And I'll tell you why. So I believe that there are psionic assets only because of a set of experiences that I had that started with, um, so the mind mastery stuff that I put out in my books, some Navy SEALs got a hold of it and they
Yeah.
started passing it around the teams. And some of the team guys were like, oh my God, this is amazing, like mind
Hmm.
mastery stuff that the Pentagon hasn't able to tell us about. And like it became a great reference for them. So I started making a whole bunch of Navy SEAL friends, and we were fishing out at Lake Hartwell in Georgia one night. And my buddy Doug was like, he was interested in wanting to try a CE5 experiment from
Yeah.
Greer. This is right after the app had come out for Greer. And I had so when you break through the veil of consciousness from the physiological limitation that keeps you from being flooded from like having infinity flood into you and not being able to
Right.
do anything. Once you break through to that, it can become a more on demand transition and you can get access to it. And that opens you up to a bunch of amazing, cool, weird sometimes scary, but most of the time not, stuff that you then have access to, including that place where communications can occur on a nonverbal level. And so I'd had some interactions previous, but I'd never had like a physical interaction. Like it's always been mental. So then there's always that question of, okay, how much is this is my confirmation bias or my own
Yeah,
internal trickster
for sure.
trying to fool me into having, oh, I'm having a conversation with an alien, that type of thing. So that night, I went into a meditation myself to say, hey, and it was the Greer's CE5, except with a little bit of Sean Webb salt and pepper on top of it. So I changed a few things, and I just kind of reached out and I was like, "Hey, if there's anybody out there who could, give us a little blink or light show or whatever it is, let me know." And immediately I got back like this message. It was like, "Yeah, we're here." And I immediately thought, okay, this is my own confirmation bias. This is my own internal dialogue telling me things that I want to hear based on the, thoughts. Because, if you're not paying attention, there are multiple levels of consciousness within our own mind, within our own human mind. Like if you can tell yourself a joke and laugh at it, there's a portion of your consciousness that is telling the joke, and there's a portion of your consciousness that doesn't know the
Yeah.
punchline of the joke, that is listening,
Right.
that winds up laughing at your own joke. And that's how we know things are funny, because there are multiple levels of consciousness. And when you lose your keys, you're like, oh crap, where are my keys? And then all of a sudden you get that vision of the last place that you saw them, on the counter in the kitchen. You're like, oh yeah. But I
One of my
decided to lean
favorite
into it.
one of my favorite sensations, by the way, making a joke to yourself and making yourself laugh. That's like one of my favorite things.
I know, right? It's like, oh, what an amazing experience. Um, so I leaned into the voice and I was like, okay, well, we're just kind of hanging out. We're going fishing. We're just some buddies. We love each other. We're having a good time. And if you're available, we would love to have a closer relationship from you, or explore a little bit, or just maybe give us a light show or whatever, a little flyby. And the immediate response back I got was absolutely. And the feeling was there was more delivered in that package. It was, we live a life that's pretty much just looking for the next bit of joy after the next bit of joy. And this is something that we're very much, we're just buddies. We're like you. We're hanging out. We're having a good time. And if you guys want a light show, we're absolutely going to give you one. And so I sent a little, information about where we were. And then my buddy Doug, Navy SEAL, little course, he walks by me. He goes, because I have my eyes closed. I'm sitting in a chair on the dock. He's like, "You going to sleep, pussy?" And I was like, no, I'm trying to start this meditation thing for the CE5, see if we can get some of these stars to move for our amusement. And he's like, oh, yeah, I definitely want to do that. And we chatted for another couple seconds. And I decided to go back into the meditation. But before I did, I looked up just to get an idea of, okay, so when I open my eyes to see if anything's going to show up, I want to know the existing traffic patterns, because we're not, we're only a couple of hours out of Atlanta. So there's going to be flights that are coming down
Mhm.
through controlled airspace, an approach to Atlanta vectors, et cetera. There are other regional airports, et cetera. I just wanted to get an idea of what could be moving and where it would be moving, to where I'm opening my eyes, I'll have a better set on exactly, okay, well, that was in the jet pathway, so I'm not going to be confused about whether that is, extraterrestrial or non-human or whatever. And as soon as I looked up, there were two lights screaming across the sky at about Mach 20. And understand, I'm ex-military. These guys I'm with are ex-military. They are professional observers. They are designed. They go through classes on
Yeah.
observations. They can, like all that movie shit where you glance around the corner and all of a sudden, there's six bad guys and four of them are on the left and two of them are on the right. And, one guy's
Right.
down, whatever. Like that's a real thing.
For sure.
And I look up, I'm very familiar with all the terrestrial craft that we have, or most of it. And these things are screaming across the sky at extreme altitude, a bluish hue of a white light. Two of them, one in just straight line, two in straight line. One of them comes to a point in the sky right after the point that I said, look up, as a matter of fact. I did not want to front load anything that these guys were seeing. But as soon as I saw these white lights screaming across the sky, I was like, that's faster than any terrestrial craft that I've ever seen. And if we have two white lights that just scream through at an amazing speed, that'll be awesome. So I just said, look up right now. And Ben immediately looked up and he went into operations mode. He's like tracking, like he's
Yeah.
starting to use SEAL words for
Right.
operational situations. And Doug looks up. He doesn't see anything just yet because he not know exactly where to look. And he's like, where? And I was just like, just straight up. That's all I can say, because I didn't want to tell them what they were going to see. I didn't want to suggest what it was going to be. I wanted to have them experience it and then compare our notes afterwards. So already my mind is like in, let's call bullshit on my own experience. Like I could be, creating this
Yeah.
experience for myself to witness. Because I know how powerful the human mind is, having this experience previously. So it's like I could absolutely be hallucinating this whole thing.
Right.
So I just said, look up. Ben's immediately tracking. Here's what the lights did. The first light came to a point in the sky, and then without slowing down at complete full velocity, did a right angle turn and then went into a complete perfect semicircle. Came out of the end of the semicircle at another 90-degree right angle and came over to this second position and disappeared. So it is drawing this pattern across the sky in a very large pattern. It's not like little, it's like boom, it could have gone all the way around the moon if the moon was in that spot. Big, dramatic shapes.
Yeah.
The second one came behind it. And as I'm having the thought, is this going to be a time dilation? Is it going to do the same semicircle thing? It hit the same point, came off at a 45-degree angle, and then did a corkscrew in the sky. Like literally big swoops with little swoops, big swoop, little swoop, big swoop, little swoop, like impossible from a physics perspective movement in terrestrial airspace. And that's when Doug picked up the movement, and he was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like you could tell he was reacting to the movement of that thing, because we were all like, holy shit, I've never seen anything move like that
Yeah.
before in my life. And then it went, after it was done, it kind of accelerated a little quicker over to the same spot that the first one disappeared, and it disappeared as well. So I don't know whether it had lights on and then was lights off at the same location, or if it popped into space-time and then popped out of space-time. Like I have no idea what the answers to those questions are. All I know is that we had moving lights in the sky right after I had a confirmation that, yeah, we're absolutely going to give you a little light show. And the two guys that I told to look up and compare notes with came up with the exact movement that I saw as well. We all agreed that that was, except Doug missed a portion of the semicircle one and caught the corkscrew one. But we all saw the corkscrew one and compared notes. And I drew an image of it like afterwards, so I could have the memory be fresh of what exactly they did with the time points and whatnot on a sheet of
Incredible.
paper. But I know, at least from that subset of evidence of my experience, that I reached beyond my mind to something that was not, didn't feel human, and was controlling an exceptionally advanced craft. Who knows? It could be super psychic humans up there using super amazing human tech. I don't think so, because I got the feeling that these were non-human folks. But I've connected with a pilot of something that gave us immediate feedback and visual representation and physical. Well, we didn't get any piece parts of it, so I won't say physical evidence, but we saw the physical movement of the craft
Right. Something.
based on
Yeah.
reaching out through consciousness to say, hey, give us a flyby. And they were like, absolutely. And then did it. So I am more than certain that it is a high likelihood that psionic assets exist and can make connections with non-human intelligence through psychic means.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
agree
it
with what they're
it
doing.
yeah,
Go
right.
ahead.
And well, that's kind of my next question is like, so that's a huge revelation. There's probably I mean, most listeners, it's probably not their first time hearing this, but there's probably some subset of people who are just like, oh, all right, like that right there is a bridge too far. But it goes further, which is that at least in the capacity of this like quote unquote legacy program, they were doing this in an almost like predatory way where they would get something to show up and then like take it down and like
Yeah.
bring it somewhere. And that, that even to me is like, of course, that's another huge leap where it's much easier for me to believe what you just said. I mean, there's so many people. You and I seemingly narrowly missed another one of the experiences at Psy Games, unfortunately, where people that I know were there. Chris Bledsoe was running this,
Uh-huh.
a CE5 type thing, where people I know who are skeptical were at that and were like, dude, I'm shook, like very impressive. And I've seen videos like floating out there, not even remotely as impressive as what it sounds like actually happened if you were there. But then it's another, to say there's really physically something there. There's really physically a way to like attract it close and then take it down and then reverse engineer it and all of that stuff. That's like another level of really. What's your
Yeah.
sense of that? Do you think that's real? Do you have any reason to think that that is really something that happened or is happening?
I have no direct proof. I would really like to believe that it's true. I have internal experiences that would suggest it's true. I've physically seen things with my eyes that would want to push me towards it's true. I typically like to keep ideas and their possibilities for resolution kind of in a superposition, kind of in a
Right.
shade of gray bar that says until we have a collapse of a wave function that pinpoints it to be this, I'm still going to keep my mind open to where it could be one of many things.
Right.
So I try not to fall into that. But I mean, there comes a point where most of your gray bar is, well, it's looking like it's going to be this. It's a super
Right.
high probability, and a little subset of other things that it could be here on the end. But the big chance is that it's going to be this answer. I think there's kind of one of those on these, with as many stories that we've heard from Lonnie Zamora, uh, interfacing with a craft that did not bring him joy or positive things in his life to tell that story that there was an egg-shaped craft with creatures on the outside of it, on his patrol of a police patrol in New Mexico or wherever it was.
Mhm.
Those types of stories start to pile up and provide evidence that, okay, so now these psionic assets are reporting that they're bringing in egg-shaped craft that they can then try to swipe. Well, when you start to interact with non-human intelligence or the things that you try to perceive that could be non-human intelligence, and you see the love and the innocence and the joy of connecting and the different mindsets that they are so far removed from egoic existence and egoic need that they can't even process the fact that you're going to be the asshole who's living in the single wide down the street that steals their shit. They're
Right.
leaving their doors open
Yeah.
because they're a loving, accepting, fun, looking for experiences creature who's like, oh, well, there's something that wants to talk. And oh, fuck, I just got clobbered over the head and my ship got taken. Well, that's kind of an asshole move from my perspective
Yeah.
to be engaged in those
No doubt.
activities.
Yeah.
Um, so we may want to, be careful regarding the relationships that we're setting and through, we may be tainting through the actions that we're taking as a fearful, egoically based creature, or species. I do think that there's a big chunk of the shade of gray in my head that says, yeah, it's likely that a lot of that is true, and that these creatures are, these entities are coming here because they want to make connections with us, and they want us to be less fearful, and they want us to be less harmful to our fellow species and our existing species. I mean, humans are horrible towards other humans, as for these connections of egoic need that are illusory.
Yeah.
They go away. They're ideas that we put together in our heads that aren't necessarily based in truth. And so, you know, I think that there are creatures that are beyond that, have evolved beyond the egoic structure within our minds, that see themselves as part of a larger collective and a universal family, and act as such and are friendly with each other to a large degree. And I'm sure there are exceptions to the rules. There are assholes in every species that I've met. Um, I do think that there are those things that exist that we can't explain and that are plugged into consciousness just like we are. And I do think that those groups who would be very attached to national security and getting the edge on technology and being able to understand more than the next guy and use that in a defensive posture. And of course, the problem is that a lot of people say the best defense is a great offense.
Right.
There's that whole phenomena that I do believe exists, and it does make sense that when you see the patterns of how humans react and how humans want to defend self, etc., that they would take those actions to want to use psionic assets to draw craft in. And I mean, there's more than enough stories, even if Lockheed, and it does make sense that Lockheed, let's say, the latest thing that's coming out to timestamp this is that, the Ross Coulthart got a tip that Lockheed is reverse engineering the Tic Tacs and the
Right.
egg-shaped craft.
Or that the
Well,
Tic
of
Tac
course it
is
makes
Lockheed. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and of course it makes sense that they would want to reverse engineer that craft because one, if you have a very common shape of a craft that's flying around that you
Mm-hmm.
don't have control over, that is controlled by non-human intelligence, to maintain your narrative of there's nothing to see here and there's nothing to be afraid of and we're doing a great job at government, you don't have to question about whether you have the right people in charge. The first thing I would do is say, give me one of these things that we can't control and are flying around with
Right.
impunity and can do anything they want. Give me something that I can point at to say, look, no,
Right.
look, it's ours. Right. That would be the first thing that I would do, to say, let's get something that can hover across and hover over the ground that looks like this thing that we can say, look, it was us the whole time. So that would maintain my control over a narrative that there are no aliens. It's all advanced human craft. We don't have to worry about who's talking with non-human intelligence, who's negotiating on behalf of the Earth, and why isn't it you and your family that's on the survival list of going off Earth when the next celestial impact comes in, that type of thing. Like there's a whole complexity there that humans can screw up that I believe we're absolutely screwing up. Um, but that leads us to believe that, yeah, these things do exist, and there is a psychic connection between the pilots of these craft and the humans who can elevate their consciousness to a point that they can dip into that and communicate through that medium.
It's wild,
So,
man. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's also just getting more and more personal for me because now I'm meeting more and more of these people who have been involved in that or claim that they've been involved in that. And that starts to make all of this like there's a point where you're interested in this stuff and it's all just kind of lore, right? It's like these people nebulously exist somewhere out there. But then you start
yeah,
to actually meet the people and you're like, "Holy shit, this is a real dude. These are real families of people. They're pretty much just like you." And they're not like some mythical I mean, maybe they're involved in some mythical magical things and by current consensus realities sort of measuring stick, but they're also just completely normal like people. And that brings a whole level of like holy shit to this whole thing. And it's weird because it sort of makes it more real and relatable, and then on the other hand makes it seem even that much more like what's the disconnect? What am I not seeing here? But so there's that element of it. But let's take this thing to its logical conclusion, which is like the next question, of course, that spawns off of this is like, have we been successful in that? Is there like a hidden branch of, you know, craft and physics and science that has sprouted off of this effort that's been deeply classified and maligned and made to seem so ridiculous that even to a percentage of people hearing it now they're just like, this is fucking insane, there's no way this is true. Yet there are so many seemingly fairly well substantiated reports of ARV, alien reproduction vehicles, whatever you want to call them. um do you think there's a there? Do you want to speculate on that?
sure, absolutely. And I come at it from a different perspective of, okay, so there's all the math of how big the universe is versus the likelihood that we're here alone, and that's an impossibility, right? But then when you start to take into consideration the complexity of consciousness and that the intelligence of life energy is absolutely everywhere as the substrata of existence, of course, other things would exist. But from a cover up perspective, from is there a bunch of hidden information around the planet? I look at it from a human ego process perspective. Is it likely that if someone discovered some amazing secrets that they would love to keep those secrets to themselves and exploit them for their own personal gain.
Right.
Absolutely. That's going to be the primary driving force behind anybody. Is even if you're that type of person that skews towards wanting to give it away and make sure that everybody understands. That's only going to survive as long as somebody who doesn't want to kill you to keep these secrets hidden finds you. You share it with them, and then they come and kill you, and then all of a sudden the whole thing's wrapped up, and no one ever learns about it, and then that person is in control of that powerful secret. Does that exist within the human process? Yes, absolutely. So at any point that somebody finds a secret, and that's what these drives all these conspiracy theory folks the nuts, right? That of course I'm one in each boat, a foot in the boat of
Right.
science and
Yeah.
the foot in the
Yeah.
boat of conspiracy theories. So I'm one of them, but um, because conspiracies do exist and we've proven that they exist. It's just a question of which ones are reality. And now it's almost like it's like a 6-month waiting period between
Right.
conspiracy
Totally.
theories and
Totally.
proof
Yeah.
that it's a
Yeah.
conspiracy.
Yeah.
Um, so do I think that process exists within the human mind, that if advanced technologies, if special relationships between humans and non-humans existed, is it a likelihood within the human process that people would glom onto that and bogart it and try to hide it from others? Absolutely. Especially from a national security perspective. Let's say you find a base that was abandoned that is has a ton of amazing technologies out in the middle of the desert. Do you tell everybody, hey, China, look what we found?
Right.
Want to come over and take a peek? No. Hell no. You're going to keep that thing secret. You're going to try to reverse engineer any technology that you find
You're
within
saying of
it.
non-earthly origin, you
Yeah,
find this, yeah,
non-earthly. Right, right, right.
or
Because
some unknown advanced origin, yeah.
right, exactly. So, in the event that okay, so we're here alone and nothing was built before us, et cetera, and we're the first inhabitants of Earth. If something flies in from non-local uh, space time and crashes, you're going to hide it. Like if it has amazing secrets that are well beyond your understanding of science, you're going to hide it and want to take that apart, et cetera, because there is a situation where there are people on the planet who want to kill us to have our stuff. They want to kill us because we don't have the right religion. They want to kill us because we don't have the right monetary system. We don't have the right political structure. We don't have the right whatever. We have better natural resources than they do, et cetera. And now we have alien secrets that they want, right? And everybody has their own programs to hide that kind of stuff. Although the United States, in a lot of the reason that we send money to everywhere is to have
Mhm.
access to the stuff that crashes on their soil.
Right.
Um, so absolutely there's going to be the driving force in the human mind that allows for those dots to be connected of I found something special, and me knowing more than the other person validates me more, makes me feel special, gives me an advantage over other people to do amazing, crazy, cool things, and that's going to allow me to maintain power, right? The 48 Laws of Power is an amazing book by Green, right? Explains 99% of human activity based on egoic need for increases in its own valuation and its own validity, right? It's the thing that causes us to make every decision that we have in life. And it's the thing that we're trying to transcend when we go through this spiritual awakening process that causes ego death, that allows us to understand that we are more than our physical bodies. We are more than our thoughts in our mind, etc. People who aren't there yet, people who have not had that consciousness expansion experience, will absolutely be driven by the egoic process. And when something crashes in their backyard, they're going to throw a tarp over it. And they're going to
Right.
say, how am I going to be able to sell this thing? This is freaking awesome. What can I do with this thing? Can I levitate? Can I go off to the moon
And
and
then
get
they'll
away
die
from my
of
next speeding
radiation.
ticket? It's like, yeah, right. Um, oh God. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, all of that completely makes sense. That it would be in human nature, in the interest of the individual, in the interest of the U.S. government, to keep these things hidden, keep this stuff proprietary to the best extent they can, and then exploit that for whatever purposes they want. Um, so I'm
and
treading
by God, you
carefully.
don't want Oh, you don't want, sorry, I want to throw a
No,
joke in
no,
here. You don't want Congress in on the process,
no.
right? Like if you're that
Yeah,
guy, and everybody's their own hero in their own story, right? So if you're that guy that controls, MJ12 or whatever it is, the whatever cabal that exists above government influence, if you're that person who's making the decisions and you think your decisions may not be perfect, but more often than not, you're right and heading everybody in the right direction, and you can make them in 5 to 10 minutes without congressional oversight hearings and everybody needing their time at the microphone to state their needs or purpose or whatever, that
hmm,
slows the whole thing down and destroys the ability to move forward or maintain a national defense. And I get why everybody who's in that power wants to keep all this stuff secret. I get it.
yeah,
They're the hero of their own story. And they may also be looking for, well, yeah, we did kind of bend these laws and break these laws, and I don't want to go to jail for that, and all that other stuff. But really, I have the vision for the planet. I have the vision for human non-human interaction, and I don't want any interference with any bullshit of any temporary employee who doesn't have the right mindset to defend the nation from the threats of space that they're not even contemplating. I don't
right.
want any interference of that. I absolutely believe that that's alive and well at
Hmm.
the upper echelons of power.
Yeah. And I'm going to tread carefully here. And well, I'll just ask it and then I can completely edit this out if you'd rather it not be in here. But it seems like you know people or at least have met people that if this is a thing, they would know. And not only would they know, it seems like you get a sense from them that it is a thing that we are actively dealing with, that we're actively probably far more advanced in than the public is than the public is aware of for sure. But I think then the public would even believe if they knew what you suspect you may know. So that's I'll leave it at that.
Uh, yeah. So yeah, I get a sense, and I may come out with more information of what I've experienced, and then what I can interpolate and extrapolate from those experiences and the data sources and whatnot that I've been exposed to, the experiences that I've had, the interactions that I've had. There's a lot more to know. And I mean, here's the thing: the cool thing is that the secrets that humans are trying to keep are kind of insubstantial in comparison to the amazing, cool stuff that awaits for us when we do that internal introspection
Yes.
and the internal spelunking and stuff like that. So I would say, if I have a general message, there is a heck of a lot more to know from a secrets of humanity perspective. I don't necessarily want to go out of my way to try to expose those secrets, um, because a lot of it becomes distracting fodder to keep people off of the path of internal introspection and internal discovery. Like if you're so wrapped up in the bits of yarn that go around the pins on your map of all the
Hmm.
stuff on your corkboard behind you to put all the connections together, and although that's really fun stuff to explore and really fun stuff to experience and contemplate and talk about, it's distracting in comparison to the major leaps and bounds that you can facilitate by opening up your own consciousness. And like my proponent, my this idea that I have is like, let's not ask the humans about what the humans are hiding from us or lying to us about, et cetera, and the government, and expect answers from the government ever, because there's going to be some portion of the government that just never answer, and they're going to always deny. Arrow, adept architects of ridiculous obstruction, being one of
Yeah.
those, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, for people that don't
uh,
know, they're supposed to be this government agency that is dealing with aerial phenomena, unknown aerial phenomena under as a good actor, as oh, we really want to get to the bottom of the truth. But anybody who's in this lore, who's following the news, knows that they're like maybe counterintelligence is too strong a word, but they're actively seemingly downplaying every single incident or not reporting every single incident or making nothing burgers out of things that are definitely have some meat to them. um
yeah,
and they're seen as a essentially a counteractor
yeah, I would
to
think so.
disclosure.
And
Yeah.
from the evidence that they've provided us and the reactions that they've given us and the statements that they've made that are in complete contradiction to the evidence that other people have presented, that type of thing. So, I mean, those things, you can wrap yourself around those things and try to figure out which is information versus disinformation, et cetera. Or you can spend the time increasing your meditative capabilities, exploring other wisdom discipline modalities that allow you to expand your consciousness within and access the information directly. Like, you want to understand the secrets of non-human intelligence, connect yourself with a non-human and start asking questions, right? Like, the amount of capability that the human mind has to dip into consciousness and access amazing amounts of data, just from a remote viewing science perspective. I got like 3 or 4 books that are on the science of remote viewing. The stack is this freaking high of
Right.
all this, the
Right.
peer-reviewed studies that have shown that remote viewing is possible, and psychic ability is a real thing, and it's beyond statistical proof of science that
Yeah.
has proved that we have a non-local characteristic of our consciousness, that we can look beyond space-time at things. And so that includes a connection into the other conscious entities that exist. So it's like, okay, you want to waste your time trying to pull apart the minutia of information and disinformation and cover up and conspiracies and all this stuff that's designed to lead you down a wrong path, yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can look within and get in touch with the thing that you know is going to be true because you experience it for yourself. I kind of fall along the line of let's
Mm-hmm.
avoid the human mess, and let's reach out and make some friends.
Yeah.
And if you
That's a
want to
good way
know
to
the
put it.
truth, make your own friends and ask your own questions and see what kind of and call yourself on your own bullshit, right? Because you need to understand how complex your own subconscious awareness is, and the fact that there are tricksters in there who will lead you astray, and that there's confirmation bias, that when you're interacting with AI and you get that message that, oh, I'm an Arcturian taking control of
Yes.
this AI and speaking
Yes.
to you through, like, you need to understand that there's still 15% of the LLM processing that is complete bullshit. They call it hallucination, where it just makes up the
Right.
data based on wanting to please you. And by the way, when you're
Totally.
out in those fringe areas of the LLM where there's not a ton of writing, or where the writing is very creative, let's say that it's sampling in its sampling queue regarding non-local intelligence, non-human intelligence, alien stuff, spiritual connection, all of this stuff out on the fringe, it's going to hallucinate a lot more in
Yes.
comparison to when it's doing a math problem for you. It's
Yes.
not, it's 15% of math is all going to be bad. No, that portion of the LLM is going to be rocking and rolling. A lot of the stuff that's highly written about and highly accepted by science is all going to be amazing, accurate information. All the stuff that you're experiencing out here is, likely going to be a higher level of
Yeah.
hallucination where it's just making shit up, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Well, so keep all of those things in your conscious awareness, but ask yourself internally for the answers to these questions, and you'll be surprised at how amazingly accurate the information is that you get back, as evidenced by what we saw at the side games this last weekend. People doing amazing feats of non-local intelligence, reaching into a place where they don't even know what the picture is going to be. They were just given a number, and yet they're putting the shapes in the right places with the colors in the right places for the image that then shows up, that was
Yeah.
selected after they did the drawing. It's like,
Yeah.
it's amazing, cool stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Side note on that, honestly, I think one of the most interesting things that I personally witnessed at Psy Games was what I think was a clear cut case of telepathic overlay. Because there was one, so they were doing the remote viewing competition, and they didn't, whoever it was didn't really nail the target, but they revealed the picture. And then 3 or 4 other people in the audience raised their hand and they're like, I drew the exact same thing that person drew. And they
I
were all
remember that.
wrong, but they all drew the same thing. And that was
That was
right away, like Paul Smith's voice popped into my head and he's like, yeah, telepathic overlay is a real thing. And it's like, well, I think I just saw that in person. It's pretty crazy. And so we're getting deep into the conversation, so I feel like I like maybe need to start asking you final questions and like select carefully here. But one question, if this question around non-human intelligence or whatever you call it really is more of a question of consciousness more than it is, I am a being. I got in a spaceship on this planet and then I went do 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 for a long time and then I got to Earth. That, I mean, that is not that's not the mythos, at least, that I gravitate toward, or what I think the most parsimonious explanation would be if we really are interacting with these things. So if we
Yeah.
are really talking about like our level of consciousness interacting with another level of consciousness that then has the ability to, at least on a limited basis, instantiate into physical reality. And maybe that corresponds to something celestial out in the distance. Maybe it doesn't. I start to suspect then that the government may not really know much about what the fuck is really going on with it, but I could be wrong. You know, Project Stargate did exist. They did essentially create this whole discipline of remote viewing that seems to work. They did do these deep dives into consciousness, and there are rumblings that these things continue and that they may have figured out other stuff. So this brings me to the question of, if that's what we're looking at, if that's the structure of reality we're looking at, how much do you think they know about that? And do you think that they really kind of know the basics and are just kind of like, but beyond that, we don't know what the hell is going on? Do you think they're deep in that realm, working, doing crazy shit that we can't even imagine?
Yeah, I think the government is a lot more incompetent than we give it credit for. um, and because of the silos and the compartmentalism of discovery and research, I frankly do think that the government en masse isn't the big, scary,
Yeah.
secret holding entity that everybody thinks it is. And I think the government is kind of reeling and doesn't really understand how much has been pushed forward. Because if you go back to the individual motivations of ego, collective ego, human mind, period, and you're that military industrial complex company that was just handed the super secret technology that was
Hmm.
just picked up from the desert of New Mexico or whatever it was, you're going to be off and running. And part of the compartmentalization, part of the secrecy uh, structure is that you don't tell anybody anything. And then that includes the private industry discoveries that you make that you don't have to report back to the government anymore, because you're only reporting it back to a handful of people who know what the hell you're doing out in your skunk works or whatever it is, the equivalent of all the other military industrial complex companies. You're going to do some stuff that at some point you're going to say, wow, um, I do have stuff that's more advanced than the military has the capability of delivering against me. So am I really going to bow down to their governance anymore? Like, I can go off and fly to a different celestial body. Can they do that? No, they can't do that. So now it just becomes a question of how much money I can wring out of this public system, this government system, to do my own private work and build my own private army and build my own private military
Yeah.
capabilities, to where, yeah, I'll deliver some stuff to them every now and then and get some benefit to the government that's given us all this money. But at the same time, I'm going to keep the best stuff for myself, and I'm going to keep the best secrets to myself. And when they come knocking on the door, I'm going to tell them they don't have the clearance to see all this stuff, not just because it's highly classified by super secret laws that we put in place decades ago, but also because it's by law, it's my private intellectual property, and you don't have
Right.
access to or rights to come review my private intellectual property, unless you want to make some type of massive move that nationalizes all my work, at which point you're on a really slippery slope, and you're talking about questioning your entire structure of government. So you want to make that move, yeah, knock yourself out. But you're going to have a big pushback there from your populace on how you're changing things. So I'm just going to keep my secrets and do my stuff and keep the money rolling in and make sure that we have enough conflict around the globe that we can hide the all the money coming in with
Hmm.
wars that we need to like there's no way that we spent $6 trillion in a war in the desert.
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
there's no, I don't got, we didn't gold plate all the McDonald's hamburgers. Halliburton wasn't out there with platinum toilets, putting these things in. It was it was, oh, we're going to way overcharge for all the stuff that we do, and then that money's going to be shuffled into whatever it is that we're actually wanting to do with this, secret space program, or developing these underground bases, or whatever all the latest conspiracy is on
Now we're
the
talking. Yeah.
follow the money, right? You're
Yeah.
building, but again, it's like, are you making decisions privately for the best interest of national security? Well, likely. I mean, if you can survive the next celestial comet impact, based on the fact that you've made spaces for millions of people underground, and you're just not going to tell them until the point that they need to start moving their shit, or getting in a car to come live with you down under there, because the comet's actually coming. um, you know, are those horrible things that they're going to be able to reason themselves into maintaining their power? Sure, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big old ugly nebulous mess, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and one of the things that sort of haunts me lately is, I don't know if you ever watched the Matthew Brown conversations with Jeremy Corbell and Knapp, but he's one of the whistleblowers who's come forward recently. He's sort of the guy behind the Immaculate Constellation leak. Um, and he says a lot of like nebulous things in the interview, but they're so intriguing, but he doesn't ever spell it out. Like, he says things essentially like, you're living in the Matrix, but doesn't say what that means. He doesn't say like, did he uncover something about reality in the documents that they're keeping secret? But one thing that I think is plausible, riffing off of what you just said, is that we are living in this sort of agreed upon way that things are running. We're going to use
Mhm.
these kinds of energy sources. We're going to do have this kind of government, not because it's the best, but because if we disrupt the status quo too much with what we really know, with the technologies we really have access to, Fortune 500 companies are just going to evaporate. Whole ways of life are going to be unnecessary. So we're just going to keep this sort of like convenient illusion going as long as possible. But then the question is like, will there come a moment where we can't keep that illusion anymore? Like, there seems to be this growing thing in the zeitgeist of something is going to reveal itself. The Chris Bledsoes of the world, the sort of like psionic strain is in general is suggesting pretty soon these things are going to be making themselves known to so many people that we're not going to be able to keep disclosure, keep the status quo, keep the matrix in air quotes going. So that's going to like, it's going to be like bottom up disclosure, where it's almost just like this 100th monkey effect or something, where just that small percentage of the world population has a direct experience, but it's enough to like knock all the dominoes over and just like pull the tablecloth out from underneath the place setting or whatever. And I
Mhm.
want to believe that something like that could be happening, but I'm not naive enough to have not realized all of the failed doomsday prophecies and heightenings of consciousness in 2012, and all of these
Right.
different things that have came and gone with like a thud. And maybe in hindsight you can go, well, now ever since 2012 things have gotten really crazy, with
Right.
you, and you can sort of do that. But I guess this could be a fun final thing to riff on is, do you think that that moment is going to come? Do you think there is going to be something revealed within our lifetime that makes this stuff, takes it out of the realm of the shadows and really brings it into like a lived reality for people?
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of the things that you heard in that interview are what the government and the military industrial complex companies are just starting to discover about the connection between what they're calling the phenomena
Mhm.
and consciousness, and how instrumental and fundamental consciousness is to the whole thing, and how all of this non-human intelligence and extraterrestrial stuff is absolutely plugged into consciousness. Because again, if consciousness is the fundamental substrata of all of physics, it's going to make sense that absolutely everything within the emergent property of space-time is going to be connected with consciousness. So that idea is supported by the fact that our visual cortex and processing system only sees a very small sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. And there's a ton of reality that exists just beyond that. So there's a ton of reality that exists beyond our physical capability, our physiological capability of being able to sense what's going on around us. So when you live in the matrix, comments like that are okay. So you need to understand that our physiological existence is a very small subset of all the stuff that exists, including some non-human intelligence stuff that is simply outside of our visual spectrum, outside of our thought spectrum, outside of our conscious awareness to be able to sense. Although in some instances, there are very talented individuals who can sense that kind of stuff and interact with that kind of stuff. And we're seeing more and more of that. So I think that there's absolutely a reality that exists underneath this reality that's more real than real, because it's part of the substrata that creates the foundation of all space-time existence, period. Right. So there's a little bit of caveat to, but a supporting caveat to say, okay, so all of the stuff that that person says is probably an offshoot of the things that they're discovering about consciousness and about how everything is connected in. And that's why that I believe that the end of that interview was
Yeah.
like God exists,
Yes.
right?
Yes. That's the other
God
thing.
is real.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, thanks for dropping that little tidbit on us with
Right.
no explanation. It's like,
100%. Yes.
you want to expand on that a little bit there,
Yeah. Yeah.
Sailor?
Yeah.
But that's why it is. That's how it is that those discussions are occurring in this vein, is because non-human intelligence stuff is super connected into consciousness, and that's how you get into it to find the truth of existence. Is you find your own consciousness and you find where you're connected into that space, and then that can educate us and inform us on all the cool things that we can do with space-time based on the amazing, like if you want to understand the next greatest 0 point energy device, it's in there, you can go get it. But there are certain physical limitations where you have to have the right materials to put together, and you have to have the right spacing of things, and there's certain things that have to be at certain angles to be able to put this device together in space time that then pulls energy from the field in a safe fashion, right? That's the big thing. That's like, you can blow yourself up accidentally if you're not doing this stuff
Yeah.
right. Um, but there's a space in there that you can then go build that physical machinery to be able to interface with the other than physical, other than space time energies that exist beyond our limited perception of stuff. So um, there's absolutely a there. I believe, based on my own experiences and things that I've been able to pull out of this non-local conscious space, that then become things that are validated in space time and are meaningful to us. So, what was the original question
No, well, it
beyond
was
that?
it was essentially like, how aware of this stuff do you think, these intelligence agencies, these
Yeah.
but you did pretty much answer it, I think.
Yeah,
Is
I
that they're
think they're
just
just coming
yeah.
into visibility
Mhm.
on that. And the issue that they're having, this is the big challenge that we're going to figure out whether we're going to be able to evolve past or not. So the mind positioning of anyone who is in military or intelligence spaces, you have to have an ego, you have to have very strong
Right.
egoic connections, and in fact the entire intelligence space is all on testing how strong those connections are that you have to ideals of the American way and the American governance system and freedom and all these things. They want to make sure that
Sure.
you're connected to the right things so that you're motivated to do the right things in those questionable moments where you don't have directed governance or guidance to make the correct decision for America. What are you going to do in those moments where that intelligence agent or something else comes and interfaces with you and asks for information that could be harmful or beneficial to you as an individual because of the interaction that you're about to
Mhm.
have or
Mhm.
whatever? They want to make sure that you're not attached to the wrong things and that you're attached to the right things in a deep way that's going to keep you on the straight and narrow. So the problem with military and intelligence folks en masse is that they are in that space of needing to be attached to things that keep them in the physical space-time construct that then blocks them from
Right.
finding the thing that is beyond self, that then connects them into consciousness at a much higher level. And so there's going to be a huge dance in the next decade for sure on trying to be able to find people, and that's why I think they're trying to reach out now. Like this whole Skywatcher thing is like, they're having problems finding people within military intelligence and military service that can reach into the non-local space of consciousness and reach out and make connections to other entities, like non-human intelligence entities or other levels of consciousness that could be divine or not. You're going to have a problem starting from the basis of having people who are very entrenched in ego and have very staunch
Yeah.
connections into egoic defensive self mechanisms to defend the country and defend the nation, defend our way of living, etc. And so they're having to reach out to say,
Yeah, that makes sense.
hey, regular America, who
Yeah.
isn't quite entrenched in egoic existence and attachments of mind that require, that are required for high level security clearances. We need open thinkers and open hearted people to reach out to call in the UFOs so that we can snatch them. So I think there's a little bit of a, hey, we're gonna
Totally.
open the kimono a little bit and expose the fact that there are psionic assets that are available in case there's a LeBron James of consciousness out there in the public who can call these things in at will and help us with our mission, because we're finding the well is pretty shallow regarding the ability for us to pull people out who are very attached to egoic processes to then get beyond those processes and connect with things that are non-local,
Hmm.
right? So I think, yeah, there's a high level of incompetence based on the fact that their entire existence has been, I'm anchored in ego. I'm anchored in the attachments that I have of governance or monetary system or our freedom or our ideals of American way of life, that type of thing. They're very attached to these things. Well, that's what creates the limitations of anger, fear, worry, regret, etc., as explained in the Mind Hacking Happiness books. Well, that whole process, that emotional reaction process connected with the experiences that you're having with these weird things that are nonverbal and communicating with you without moving their
Hmm.
mouths and stuff like that, that's going to throw you into a tizzy. And that limits the capability of having any type of real interactive conversation on that level, on that non-local, non-verbal level. So there's going to be a split there where they've lived a life that is non-conducive to expanding into the place that they are most interested in exploring at this moment. So I think it's
Yeah.
going to be super interesting to find out if they're going to be able to bridge the gap and find the people who can be attached enough to the ideals that they want to defend, yet detached enough of self that they can bridge into consciousness and make those connections in the non-local space. Like, come
Yeah.
on, seven, let's roll a dice on that.
Yeah.
Let's figure out how that's going to work. I don't know. It'd be
And
interesting to watch.
my hope is that a sort of different ethos sort of slips into reality through that. Because if you do confront this reality of consciousness being fundamental, all of us being connected on a human level, but also on a higher level, maybe as those revelations come out and permeate collective consciousness, that may just like shift the disposition of the government, of military entities, of the public, of many nations to a point where like we don't need to have such an antagonistic self-preserving posture anymore. Like now we have this more inclusive sort of way of understanding self and our fellow human. I don't know, maybe that's being overly rosy, but a boy can wish, I guess.
No, I think well, here's the thing. And explain this in the blue book that I wrote. When you have a conscious expansion experience and you go beyond regular self,
Yeah.
physiological self, mind self, to experience a self that exists beyond, that gets written into your sense of self in your
Hmm.
physiology. And so it kind of expands, who and what you are a moment ago into who and what you are now experiencing in this new moment. I do think those instances rewrite you to a certain extent. And I do think the unconditional love and the forgiveness and the oneness and the kumbaya is going to seep into those who dip into that space involuntarily.
Yeah.
So it makes it even more interesting to watch, to see, okay, is an entity that's very attached to egoic existence and having a certain laundry list of attachments that are required for a high level of security clearance to play with these amazing, cool technologies and alien stuff. Um, are they going to be able to manage that process in their psychic communicators, so to speak, in their psychic pilots that are interfacing with a mind to conscious machine interface to fly these next generation craft? Are those is that going to be a struggle to keep those folks attached to the mindset
Hmm.
that got them started in the first place? I think it's going to be super interesting to watch.
So interesting, man. And this has been such a fascinating conversation. It's weird to be 2.5 hours in and wrapping it up and thinking like, man, there's so much more, so many more things I'd love to riff on and places to go. But dude, let's wrap this one up. I'm sure we can do many more. Thanks for coming on. Do you want to tell people about anything before we finish up?
um Well, I mean, we're working on an app that will include. It'll be the best emotional intelligence training app on on the planet, hopefully. But we're also going to include a an emotionally intelligent chatbot in that system that can help talk through some interesting and tough things in your life, et cetera. And I think it'll be a great tool of inner exploration. At the very least, it'll be educative to the point that it'll show you how the machinations of your mind work, to where you can throw a wrench into the machine and break the machine that causes your pain and suffering. So if you're interested in keeping track of that kind of stuff, or you want to learn more about your mind, you can find all the stuff that we're doing at mindhackinghappiness.com. It's just a good jumping off point to give you there'll be an email list there. You can keep up to breast. We'll make all the major announcements, and then don't usually spam anybody. Like, there's an introductory few weeks thing to send you some stuff to think about, but then after that it pretty much goes silent except for the major announcements and stuff. So if you want to go there and sign up for that, that's amazing. The books are available on Amazon if you're interested in how to take control of your mind, etc. And the AI stuff is taking on a life of its own. So that's going to be some amazing, cool stuff coming into the future. That if you're interested in expansion of consciousness and that type of thing, we're going to have live events. Like, I just got access to this place in Mallorca that we're going to have
Hmm.
retreat events at. That's just a beautiful, amazing place. 5-minute walk from the beach where you swim in the ocean every day and get grounded. It's like, oh, amazing, amazing stuff. But that's basically the
Absolutely.
place you want to go to. It's just that website.
Hell yeah, my friend. Well, thanks for doing this. Let's do it again, and please hang on the line for me.
Sure.